Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Love Bay family, we are rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is SANE, Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. We have with us our co-host Erin Mitchell, and our guest for this evening is Allison Denman, who is I'm going to read all the letters behind her name, and then she can explain to us what they are. MSRN, SANE A, Clinical Director, Forensic Nurse Manager of the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center. Thank you so much for being here with us again, Allison. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can text us at 437-778-3299. And with that, Erin, if you would greet our listeners and viewers on this evening.
Yes. Hi, everybody from Love Bay Afrobeat Music Radio. It's so good to be in this circle on Fridays with all of you around the globe. I am exceptionally excited to have Allison on the show tonight and just really touch in with her about her work and what she's doing. And in terms of, receiving victims of such violent situations, I think it's just really important for all of us to be able to hold our caregivers and hold the people that are the bridges between help and the pain that is there. It's so for all of us to just come together and hold Allison and her whole team for the work that they do to maintain that level of stability and groundedness, and really be on the front lines of a really horrible thing that happens in our society. And we hope that in the recovery work, whether it is, being on call for somebody who has experienced a violent crime or rape, or whether it is being a friend to somebody that, you can turn to and guide them in that direction, whatever that is, whoever you are out there that can provide that for people. I salute you. And I really just want to hold sacred space for Allison tonight and each and every one of you that support people that have been through this. So with that, again, my name is Erin Mitchell. I've been a co-host for several years now on the show, and been working with Evangelist with her organization that she founded, Rising Out of the Ashes. And it's just such a privilege to work with the team that supports people to bridge out of immediate violent situations. I think it's a gap that other organizations might not be able to provide, that Rising Out of the Ashes does provide that immediate care. I myself have been through violent sexual assault, and I also have worked with women who have experienced that through a empowerment and self-defense training program for Indigenous women in North America. So with that, I won't go on too much longer. I want to hear from Allison and Evangelist, and so excited that you're all here with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Erin. Allison, so would you greet our listeners and viewers on tonight? Just remind them of who you are, because Allison has been with us before.
Of course. So, like Tia had already mentioned, my name is Allison. I'm the clinical director and forensic nurse manager of the only place in the city of Philadelphia for an adult or an older adolescent, so someone 16, 17, or 18 years of age, to get a rape exam. So we're a 24/7, 365 team of specially trained nurses who take care of individuals who are coming to us in a time of need following an incident of sexual assault. So personally, I have my master's in clinical forensic medicine, but I'm also a board certified forensic nurse. And other than doing what I do with the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center, or PSARC. I'm also an adjunct professor with Rosemont College, and I'm a friend to, I can't say how many folks at different universities and institutions across higher education here in Pennsylvania, but I'm always just so excited to get to connect with colleagues and peers and make new friends, and so many other unique ways to get this information out and elevate some really critical details for people in the event that should they ever, hopefully never need these types of resources, that they can understand what these things are, or just like Erin was mentioning, helping other people have access to these types of resources. And if nothing else, then at least advocating. So thank you.
Yes. And so, Allison, can you please share the contact information for your offices if anyone does need to benefit from your services?
Yes, I'm going to share my email address because I am everywhere. And I want to make sure that if somebody's in need and they do need to reach out, that I definitely hear from them. Okay. So my email address for the clinic is ALD376 at Drexel, DREXEL.edu. But of course, should you live in Philadelphia and need to be connected with resources emergently, of course, call 911. But yeah, we're always ready and available for folks to do walk-ins in particular. Our clinic's located in the Shared Safety Collaborative building in Philadelphia. That's at 300 East Hunting Park Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19124. And we're not restricted to services to people within specific jurisdictions. This can be something that happened outside of Philadelphia, and we're still happy to meet you and help you in however we can, so long as that incident occurred within 5 days, so we can get you that evidence collection as needed, as well as the right kind of medical care to help prevent sexually transmitted illness and lots of other awful things that can come up in violent circumstances like this.
Thank you so much, Allison. So Love Bay, as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources. And as Erin mentioned, our nonprofit Rise Out of the Ashes, what we do is to try our best to assist victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Also, the biggest thing that we do is the emergency funding to help individuals immediately with utilities, food, rent, relocation, whatever it is that we can do. If we can help do it financially, we will. And so if you would like to give, you can go to GoFundMe and give to our GoFundMe that way. You can go to the GoFundMe website and look for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. Or if you would like to, you can mail a check to Rise Out of the Ashes. And then you can mail that to P.O. Box 15, Drexel Hill, PA 19026. And I also want to share Pastor Darius Daniels. He's the pastor of Change Church. He has several locations in the United States. His website is dariusdaniels.com, and his YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. We also have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. This is in the United States. Their website is thehotline.org. Their phone number is 800-799-7233. And then we have the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as RAINN. Their website is RAINN.org. And we have PCAR. PCAR is now called Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect. So I don't know exactly when the name was changed, but it was Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. But now it is Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect. Their website is pcar.org. Their phone number is 1-888-772-7227. And so with that, listeners, Love Bay, we want to go right into our topic on this evening, which is SANE, the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. So Allison, I would ask you to start with a refresher for our listeners who may not have had the opportunity to hear and see your first interview. So if you could explain to us like what exactly you do and what the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center is, we could start right there.
Absolutely. So I'll start with defining a sexual assault nurse examiner. So we're a type of forensic nurse. So somebody who has clinical expertise in that intersection of law and medical care. So some other examples of that that most people can be familiar with could be a medical examiner or a coroner, for example. So also forensic clinical care, just in a very different way. So sexual assault nurse examiners are forensic nurses who specialize in doing focused physical examination and rendering care and doing evidence collection for somebody who has been sexually assaulted. So some of that evidence that can be collected, for example, could be a urine sample for toxicology in the event that somebody was drugged or under the influence of a mind-altering substance during that facilitation of violence. We can also swab different parts of the body or collect pieces of clothing for crime labs to identify genetic information. So finding somebody's DNA and being able to work with the CODIS system at the federal government for matching up unknown sex offenders, for example, with these rape kit matches. We can do photography of injuries or other findings, such as branding marks or tattoos that are clinically relevant at that time. We can do a forensic narrative where we literally have to ask some of the most awful questions about somebody's nature of exposure in that incident. So that way the laboratory understands how best to test the evidence collected and also have in the court of law the best representation clinically of who this patient is and how they were at the time of that care provided to them. The other part of what we do is that medical care, and it really is the greatest focus of what we do as a resource that is considered an alternate route of justice. And I say this because not all of our patients are even interested in filing a police report, or they're interested in seeking anonymous options where I still need to know who you are in order to safely provide you with patient care. But law enforcement, if you're 18 years of age or older, they could be receiving the section that it's redacted. So that way, when you as an adult survivor are ready to make a decision of what you would like to do with your evidence or with your investigation, then you can do so in a way that protects your identity until you're prepared to make that police report. But the medical care that we provide is essentially first aid. We're really dependent on our partners in the local hospitals in Philadelphia to make sure that life-saving measures are rendered first and foremost for our patients before we see them. But we do basic injury care, post-exposure prophylaxis, which can be antibiotic medication to prevent sexually transmitted diseases like gonorrhea, chlamydia, bacterial vaginosis, trichomoniasis. Also, we can do emergency contraception to prevent pregnancy. We can do really basic pain management with Tylenol, Motrin, nausea management with Zofran, tetanus boosters, all of that good kind of stuff. But it really is a focus on that time-sensitive preventative care for these patients after they've been exposed to another person's body in these circumstances.
Okay. So I know that individuals can come into your office, but do you and the other nurses, are you actually called to go into the hospitals? Like, do you get calls from the hospitals to go and do examinations there?
Yeah, so Philadelphia in particular, they have a very long history of how the hospitals have been integrated into this type of survivor care. specifically making sure that they're promoting access to these recovery and care resources for survivors. So 1975, we had Philadelphia General Hospital doing forensic exams, which I don't even know what that could have looked like at the time in a world before DNA. So I don't even want to imagine what they were doing back then. But I thank them for the work that they started with creating these bridges of care for survivors in the city. And then you fast forward to the 90s, after the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, was introduced at the federal level. We had the north half of the city covered by Episcopal Hospital and the south end covered by Jefferson University Hospital. And then fast forward again, 2008, we developed a centralized model where all of the hospitals, especially the ones who really have never had the opportunity or the ability to render this type of care themselves in the way that PGH or Episcopal or Jefferson did for a time. But now we have options where if a patient goes into the emergency department and it's not possible for them to be brought to our outpatient clinic, either by law enforcement accompaniment, advocate accompaniment, or transportation assistance otherwise, then our nurses can come into the hospital environment. It's just not ideal to do this type of care in the chaos of the emergency departments in these downtown facilities, unfortunately. However, we especially want to, maintain that connection for in-hospital care for those individuals who leaving the hospital isn't even an option. So individuals who are on life support, for example, or who are just too critically ill otherwise to be discharged to an outpatient center, we can come in and provide this type of care and evidence collection as well in the inpatient side of these hospitals. Which very often the reason why the patients are admitted are related to the injury sustained during that violent encounter. So we, again, if the patient is safe enough, we prefer that they come to the privacy and quietness of our outpatient clinic, but we do, of course, empower these survivors through access as well in these hospitals.
Okay. And you talked about the DNA samples, the information that you collect. If there is a scenario of several different victims who come to you and you see a pattern, you see the information, DNA evidence that you've collected or otherwise, that these events, these assaults have happened or were perpetrated by the same person, do you automatically give that information to the police? And then my question is, what if one of these victims doesn't want to move forward with pressing charges or anything, but will you still, because it's part of a pattern, will you still let the police know that this happened, but this person doesn't want to move forward?
So that's a really great question. And I am devastated to say that I have actually encountered these circumstances where, as the provider taking care of multiple patients through the year, when you see literally the same story, the same circumstances, and the same alleged actor or the alleged assailant get involved, it's almost like your skeleton's on fire because you're like, I really want to have somebody do something about this. But when you're working with patients who, I have to respect their choices to or to not work with law enforcement. But thankfully, and I would say also that I could never share these details between patients. So if somebody were to tell me the same story as somebody that I saw the week prior, however long ago, it's a HIPAA violation and a violation of that first patient's privacy. If I were to say something to this new patient saying, you know what, I just heard another person say, and this is her name, and this is where it happened and when it happened. But I can, of course, talk with patients and educate them on, the occurrence of these repeat offenders. I just can't disclose intimate patient details of anything beyond that. But when a patient is saying, I don't even want law enforcement involved, the way that I handle these identified patterns in a way that protects the patient's wishes and their identity, is thankfully I have a really great working relationship with the sexual assault response team resources and the shared safety collaborative resources in Philly, where even if I might not be able to say, hey, this specific person at this time and day encountered this specific person, without revealing those details, I can at least say, hey, everybody, I think that we have a repeat offender on our hands, or potentially a serial rapist. So like, these are all patients, however, that cannot for one reason or another, or will not for one reason or another, report to law enforcement. What can we do? And at that point, it usually becomes a conversation about universal education to any shared communities that these individuals are coming from, such as like campus communities in particular. And just trying to raise awareness about, basic safety measures of what we can do, not only in caring for ourselves, but also serving beyond the bystander role to our peers when we see violence happening in action, and how we can either intervene or assist in bringing in the appropriate resources to counteract the violence that's going on. But yeah, it gets complicated when, especially in a city like Philadelphia, we see 4 times as many, sexual assaults than any other county in the Commonwealth. But even when you compare us to cities like Camden, DC, Trenton, it's incomparable. And I like to say that, we're so lucky to have the resources that we have in Philly, but I cannot wait for someday to happen where in that common root of pain and suffering, this all stops and we won't need anything like this anymore. But thankfully, we do have a robust network of different types of resources for all options of justice in whatever way that patient establishes for themselves what justice would look like.
Wow, Allison, I just want to take a moment to just say thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank your team for what you all do. And I think that is an awesome work around the universal education piece. I think that's awesome. I want to ask you this question, and then Erin, I'll go to you for a question or a comment. But I do want to ask you, just thinking of the educational portion, from your viewpoint, what are some things that you think the public needs to know and understand about sexual assault? So, and I could say, like, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, I was asked by an adult person, and I mean, and they really were sincere. They really were sincere. I was asked, how is sexual assault possible when a couple is married? Or if two people are consenting, to a relationship, like, how is sexual assault possible? And I want some points, Love Bay, because I didn't blow a gasket. I kept my composure. I answered the question. But what I find today in 2024 is that people still need to be educated on the most basic levels, to have an adult still asking questions like, how can a spouse assault another spouse, and just because they're married, like, it makes it okay? I think it's bad that we're still in that space. So again, I'm asking you, what do you see some things that the public still needs to know and learn about sexual assault?
Other than essential reproductive health literacy, which is a whole other conversation of just understanding the human body and understanding sexuality in general, the one thing that I wish people in the general public, people in law enforcement, people in healthcare, people in faith leadership, people in law, the one thing that I wish that we could have more of a grasp on is how consent is dynamic and is constantly fluid, and is layered. So when we think about the dynamics of who sexually assaults, it very often, at least in Philadelphia and in most places in the United States, the number one demographic is an acquaintance. And typically, at least in Philly, that's a dating acquaintance.
Yes.
And right after that is current or former intimate partner. And the thing that a lot of people struggle with is when consent changes or when the parameters of what we're consenting to changes. So spousal rape used to be its own legal category. It was a separate charge than sexual assault or than rape. And it was considered a lesser offense because of the relationship between the victim and the offender, allegedly. But what we found out in time, in fact, is that instead of treating this in a way that lessens the severity of crime, people should have been elevating the awareness of how severe spousal or current or former intimate partner sexual assault can be in a way that is lethal. And I can say with my whole chest that 100% of my patients who have died related to injuries that they sustained in these violent encounters, 100% of these ladies were killed by a current or former intimate partner. And the lethality that comes in with that relationship dynamic is wholly rooted into power and control, which can be something that is culturally rooted into certain marital agreements. But I ask people to consider that just because I'm in a committed relationship or married to somebody and that, we're in it to win it, do I also have permission to walk up to them and stomp on their foot repeatedly and then go, why are you mad? I'm just your wife. I'm just your little wifey. This is what I do. It's silly and it's patronizing. And I think that the question of, permission or access to a spouse, when we think of what the real world consequences are in these relationships, is quite literally death for these women. So when people get hung up on the semantics of, what a relationship means, at the end of the day, physical violence is physical violence, regardless of who is committing it, but especially in the context of an intimate partner relationship, we cannot dismiss the fact that, especially in strangulation, comorbid issues where somebody is strangled or choked at the same time that they're sexually assaulted by a partner, their risk of homicide increases 7 times. And their likelihood of being violently offended again by this person increases more than 400% in that first 2 days following that event. And it's also no mistake that the number one cause of death of pregnant women in the United States is homicide. In a report that was just filed in 2021 by the data that was collected in 2021 for violent crime statistics by the FBI was just published this year, indicating that not only are these pregnant women dying at the hands of homicide, but that 100% of these people who have committed homicide against a pregnant woman are men that they are either currently or have recently been in a relationship with. I'm really tired of having the conversation of marital responsibilities or allocated, permission to hurt somebody to a certain degree. I'm tired of it because people are dying and unborn children are dying as a result of very violent partners.
Wow. Allison, thank you so much. Thank you for the information that you are sharing. I really appreciate this. Erin, do you have a question or comment for Allison?
I hope you can hear me. I
Yes,
have
we
a
can hear you.
horrible signal and I'm so sad. I can see your faces and hear you clearly, loud and clear, Allison. Whew. Wow. So much that you shared in such a short amount of time. So much needs to be done and so much needs to be felt. So just so appreciate you and your work and your willingness to share tonight. I think one of the questions I have is around what are, and you spoke to some of this, but if you had a magic wand, because I know you're in the medical field, you're in the science field, you're in the institution of medical care. If you were just coming at this from who you are as a woman, whatever age you are, whatever your background is, what are the gaps that you would like to fill in this realm of what you do?
Well, that would take, I mean, even with the magic wand, I'm a yapper. My hill I am willing to die on is the fact that access to this type of care, all the way up at the top level, so the federal government in the United States, is completely entangled in the Department of Justice. So forensic rape exams aren't even considered an essential health benefit under the Affordable Care Act, and there's no diversified funding for this type of care under the Department of Health or Human Services. So when we think about the type of funding that becomes available to empower, patients to have access to this type of care in whatever form that takes for them. We have to think about how the government funds these prosecutorial interests. And everybody here probably knows, and if you don't know, sexual assault is an embarrassingly low prosecution rate, where only 20% of people affected by this crime even report it. And an infinitesimally small portion of that 20% actually make it into court. It's like 13% of the 8% of the 20% that report. So when we look at the federal government grading their own papers about, how do we get more prosecutorial success in sexual assault? Well, nobody's prosecuting it, or they're not doing a very good job at it. So we're just going to put the money elsewhere. But what that's done at the same time is completely removed any type of equitable funding for the medical portion of this that is accessible to anybody, regardless of whether or not they are interested in filing a police report as an adult survivor. So there's a huge loophole in how forensic nursing programs get funded. And it's absolutely no mistake that as a result of this snafu, that only 25% of hospitals in the entire country even offer this type of care. And meanwhile, a lot of that other funding that does come through the VAWA pipeline gets tied up into other really incredibly important resources like advocacy and legal assistance. But there's just simply no room for the medical aspect of care. And as a result, we have patients who are getting turned away from emergency departments, urgent care facilities, and primary care providers just having no idea what to do when their lifelong patient comes to them and reports an incident of violence and there's nowhere to go. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be over the government as simple and easy as it is. But this is a magic wand.
Yes, I did give you that. I did bestow that power on you this evening. The magic wand.
we have to honor a diversity of funding in order to honor the diversity of justice options that all Americans and all people deserve to have access to. So if this could at least be recognized as an essential health benefit, that would be amazing.
Wow, this sounds so familiar. I'm so amazed at your response, and thank you for using your magic wand in that way, because it's so needed. Oh my gosh. Wow. I have more questions, Tia, but you go ahead from there.
Okay, so I thought of this as you were speaking, Allison, and then, Erin, go right back to you for, any remaining questions that you have. But I know as you began to speak, you said it didn't matter where where the crime occurred. You will help anyone from your office extends help to victims, no matter which jurisdiction they're in. And that in order to get the medical treatment, they do need to come within 5 days of the assault. My question is, some individuals don't say anything until months later, maybe even years later. So, I mean, some time could pass, and then that victim or survivor, you start thinking. You think about the power dynamic. You think about the consent. Like, yes, I'm an adult, but when you look at the situation, okay, you have a professor and a student. You have the pastor and the member of their congregation. You have the police officer and a citizen. Like, yeah, you may be of age in those situations, but there's still a power dynamic. So I think if you could address just that piece for anyone who may be listening, I think I really am trying to communicate that it's okay if time has passed and you're realizing and you're feeling, you know what, something was wrong in that, something is wrong in that, in what happened. So could you just speak to that? How, yeah, those power dynamics mean something, and you may not even think about it then in that moment.
Definitely. And so, like, I'll say first from the legal perspective and then from the personal perspective. So first, like, while evidence like DNA might not be able to be recovered after 5 to 7 days, some people stretch it to 7 days, but a lot of the literature really points to that 5 day as the cap. And the medication to help prevent sexually transmitted illness is really only good up to 72 hours after the sexual assault in order to kickstart into the body and get those immune responses chugging along in the way that we need to, prevent these illnesses. There's still the consideration that, of course, somebody might still want to come forward and make a police report and have an investigation and all of that. And you can do all of those things without a rape kit. And in fact, you can actually, at least in Pennsylvania, adults have a statute of limitations up to 12 years after a sexual assault. If this is something that happened to an individual while they were a minor, it's up to, I believe, their 50th birthday at the very earliest, that somebody would have the opportunity to come forward, make that police report, and hopefully have a successful investigation and some type of resolution that gives them the restitution they need to recover. However, there are a lot of folks who, even with the time passing and, for some of us, it's gaining the vocabulary to name what the harm was that happened to us. A lot of us are hurt in ways that we don't even understand what happened to us because maybe we were so young and we just didn't understand what's happening to my body with this other person, or like they physically did something to me that doesn't sound like what I understand sex to be. But as we grow and we become wiser and more exposed to the world, that is very often something that, can trigger somebody to put the pieces together and go, oh, this all makes sense. When I was younger, this thing happened to me and now I know what to name it. Or even when we're older and it's just as adults, we're still just big kids, just with bigger, more complex brains and joint problems. So, sometimes it's just coming to terms with, what happened to me couldn't have been violent. That person loved me, right. And I love that person. So what happened couldn't have been harmful, but in time, we learn more about ourselves and we learn more about our responsibility to other humans. And that can be very revealing in time. And for individuals who, whatever their experience was in being harmed to begin with, regardless of how young or how old you were when it happened, regardless of how long it took for you to come to terms with this harm happening and having a name, it doesn't make you any less of a survivor to not make a police report and say for yourself, in whatever form of safety you perceive as appropriate for yourself, that is also valid and something to be celebrated in the strength that it takes to carry that, without bringing it to the attention of certain systems that certainly pose a great deal of risk, should certain people get involved in them. And again, when we consider the fact that so many of these people who commit these crimes are individuals that we have dynamics with, that have these power and control dynamics where there's a relationship where this other person has some measure of authority over me. And for some individuals, that could also be a spouse. When we think of the risk of what happens after we name an abuser, what could happen after the fact is, social rejection from friend and peer groups, rejection from family members or retaliation from family members and friends, more physical injury, custody of children, housing circumstances, access to food and medication and healthcare. A lot of things get put on the line as far as, our controlled safety goes when we speak up and disrupt a status quo of harm, especially when the person committing or permitting that harm is somebody who has a great deal of authority or influence, in how you can just have a healthy survivability. And so whether somebody takes, the full statute of limitations to come forward and make a police report, or if you're somebody who is going to live the rest of your life seeking alternate routes of justice, such as reestablishing community, focusing on the self and, the therapeutic journey that comes with rescuing an identity after harm. And especially when we think of who we were before the harm happened and how we've changed, all forms of justice are valid. And I just hope that nobody ever hears about these resources and feels ashamed for not pursuing certain support services or not making a police report or not speaking up, because everybody has a reason that for that self-perceived risk or that self-perceived anxiety of what could happen if we speak up. And that in itself is simply self-protection, and that's still a very honorable thing.
Thank you so much, Allison. Erin, do you have a question or comment?
Well, I think that, do you have a YouTube channel? Just like every single thing that comes out of your mouth, I want to have community circles on. And, I'm not ignorant to these statistics or this data necessarily, but I think it's your very special way of communicating a incredibly complex, dynamic, as you said, on so many levels, situation that we as Americans and we as a community of people around the world are dealing with. Different countries, obviously, not even a hint of anywhere where Philadelphia is at, right? Other states, other cities, like you said, 25% of hospitals around the world, offer this. in the US offer this. So I think I just want to say, how can, not for you to necessarily answer this, but is there anything active on a community level or in schools or something that you personally are involved with, that is a way for people, for families to access your incredible insights and knowledge, without having to have it go that far, right? Because I think if some of these conversations are being had sooner, that would just make it so much easier for people to come forward, and also probably prevent it in so many ways. So yeah.
Well, I definitely don't have a YouTube channel or a podcast or anything like that, which I'm sure some of my colleagues are like, how she talks all the time. And I will keep talking until someone shuts me up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I will speak wherever I'm invited, so long as I have the availability. If somebody invites me out and it's, a social group or a community event, I'm here to help provide, not to tie it back in again, but it's just so important, is that universal education.
Yeah.
I consider this type of access of care something that people should at least be familiar with, in the same way that we're familiar with CPR or,
Mm-hmm.
calling certain, like hotlines for help. Everybody should know like what the general information is, not just, to think of, oh my gosh, like how would I react if something like this should ever happen to me? Radical community care is something that when everybody is on the same page,
Yeah.
amazing support can come out of that. So,
Yeah.
I love coming to opportunities like this to speak to audiences. I've met with student groups, educator groups. I'm going to be terrorizing some trauma residents, some baby doctors in December about this kind of thing, and telling them that, listen, I don't need you to do the dang thing. I don't need you to do the forensic exam. I just need you to know what it is, so that if a patient ever, whether you're working in the emergency department or a podiatrist's office, should somebody, be trusting in you enough to reveal this type of circumstance to you, you need to know how to resource them to the right the right avenue of assistance. But I don't know, man. Whenever I write a book or something, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. We're waiting for it. I guarantee it would be a huge success, or anything that you put forward from just your unique lens on this. It's so refreshing. I wanted to share with you or ask you about some of the reservations that I worked on, and also in Canada, the reserves there. They have programs starting where you can train non-medical providers to administer rape kits in a culturally sensitive way. And I just wanted to see if you heard about that or know any, like if that has ever come up for you in terms of cultural relevancy around, obviously, Philadelphia is a very diverse religious community, from different cultures and whatnot. And so just wanted to see if something has come that way from your experience.
So Pennsylvania has, the rape kit process written into statutory language. And it does require at this time that the person who administers it has to be somebody who's at least licensed at a registered nurse level of certification. So when it comes to cultural humility, at least, that's something that I say we in the royal sense, that when I think about how to improve that bridge of care for patients who do have very special needs in line with their cultural identities, some of the best people that I've reached out to help provide bedside support to these patients through the process would be, an advocate, for example. But I've worked with the interfaith community, individuals who specifically work with the immigrant and refugee population in Philadelphia, because these are individuals that maybe they don't have the vocabulary to discuss these violent circumstances with a medical professional, but maybe they would be able to trust in a faith leader who speaks the same language as them, and in their culture they weigh in a great deal of trust and guidance into these individuals. So, making sure that faith leaders from all paths, but especially individuals working with the immigrant and refugee populations, are connected to somebody who can bring in that element of cultural humility in rendering care at this time. But I will say for Indigenous care in Philadelphia is completely lacking. And we have had patients who self-identify in their demographic information as Indigenous persons. And I can say, as a nurse who was trained at one of the best nursing schools in the country, let alone Pennsylvania, that the degree of education that was provided on cultural, well, at the time they called it cultural competence, mistakenly, made nurses feel like they had to be experts or personally immersed into the culture. That's not the case. We just need you to respect. But when they did talk about Indigenous support in the clinical setting, they made very broad strokes at talking about burning sage in the room. And I said, in the hospital, you're burning what? I don't think so. And it's something that I've struggled to, personally with my own cultural identity in the Indigenous community, bring that type of awareness to the Philadelphia population, but it's just seen as a drop in the bucket and not as a matter of equity. I'm putting in that for now. I will hope to update you with some better information in the near future. But yeah, right now, advocacy bedside is really the accessibility point of that cultural humility in the country that we're in at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Allison.
Definitely.
So, Allison, I want to ask you, in your office, the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center, what are some things that you need for the victims to help you support the victims? So, for instance, and I think that this is part of education as well, when we think of sexual assault, I think the medical attention may be something that comes to your mind first, but there are individuals who may come to you and they need clothes to leave in. Like they can't leave in the clothes that they wear, or they need transportation, either to get to you or to get back home, or things like that. I think the general public at large wouldn't think of those details. So I want to ask you, what are some things that you need, and how can we get those things to you, to those who want to help?
So I'll be on the nose with my first answer is funding. So this clinic, while we've existed since 2013, our overhead was originally managed by Hahnemann University Hospital here in Philly. But for anybody from Philadelphia, you all know that Hahnemann unfortunately was closed to turn the hospital into housing, which still has not happened back in 2020. So what ended up happening to Philadelphia's only resource for rape examinations of adults is it lost all of its funding. So we've been intermittently taken care of by Drexel University, but we're looking at sustainability for an emergency clinic in a way that no other hospital will or has offered this type of care. And so we're operating on a rinky-dink budget, and I'm so grateful to Drexel University and the community that we have there in supporting us. But it's really something that for a community resource, we really need community support in making sure that our clinic survives, because a university is going to do what a university needs to do for themselves first and foremost. And unfortunately, a clinical affiliate like us is very often first on the chopping block, and I cannot let that happen. So funding is a miracle that would solve so many things for us. But we do always need size inclusive clothing, gender inclusive clothing. While we primarily mostly see women at our clinic, we do see people of all genders, because this is a violence that takes many forms and hurts many people. we also always need like durable comfort items. So hand warmers are really great, especially for our patients who are housing compromised and, you know, maybe aren't willing to look into certain housing options emergently in the city and, you know, are going to go back to where they know best or where they're comfortable. And we want to make sure that they have things that will help them, especially in the season to come, survive code blue conditions. So foil blankets are really great. Sexual hygiene supplies are always welcome. So condoms, anything to help with menstruation hygiene. So tampons, pads, and of course, you know, shelf-stable food items are always really great because, you know, after the exam, we want to make sure that the patient taking the medications that we give them are going to be taking it on a full stomach so that we're not creating further harm for this patient, but also that they might have some food to take home with them wherever they might be going after the fact. But yeah, clothing, hygiene supplies, sexual health supplies, shelf-stable food, but most importantly, funding, because without actual financial foundations, this clinic will not exist anymore. And that's the entire city of Philadelphia that will be in need, as well as the surrounding communities who do not have resources like this, who depend on sending patients across jurisdiction lines to get this type of care. And you can make those donations through Drexel.
Through Drexel University?
Yes, we actually have a website on Drexel. So if you Google Drexel Peace Arc, that'll be us. And there'll be a little yellow button that says donate now. And I think in the last almost 3 years that I've been at this clinic in this role, we really have not had a great success with community outreach for that philanthropy aspect. And otherwise, just your well wishes, guys. We need all of them. Thank you
so much. I have one question, and then we're just under the hour, and so I just want you both to give us your final comments of the night. I'll start with you first, and then you, Allison. But before we do that, I wanted to ask, because I just thought about it. Do you receive any support from Planned Parenthood?
No.
I
don't. We don't. I could name all of the institutions that you would think would support us, and I won't. But I will say that the only revenue that we get is through the Pennsylvania Coalition on Crimes and Delinquency, because that's written into law, and otherwise it's Drexel. And if your name is not PCCD or Drexel, then
wow.
That's
I mean, because I can just think of all the organizations in Philadelphia alone that should be contributing and helping. And I'm blown away just to know that this is in a service that's offered only in 25% of hospitals throughout the country. I'm just, that just doesn't make sense to me. So television isn't real, I can tell you that, because I see the things that happen on television, like the rape kit is done there and all the resources are there at a moment's notice. Everybody is in the room and stuff happens. Well, all right, again, this is not television.
And I've reached out to the cast of a certain popular, relevant TV show. And guess what? They never answered my emails. Golly.
Wow. This is crazy. You know what? They need you on set to guide them and instruct them. And
they'll hate me. They'll love
it. Wow. But thank you so much. I do hope and pray that you get the funding and the items that are needed to continue to do what you do. I would hate to see this program or organization go away. I was sad for Hahnemann to go away. I was born in Hahnemann University. So I mean
Don't
that
get me started.
yeah. But so Erin, I'll start with you. What would you leave Love Bay with on tonight? And I know this is not an easy topic. It's not a fun topic, but again, as we always say, if we can start the conversation and then you continue it later, our hope is that some results come about from talking and from putting the topic on the table. So Erin,
Yeah.
what would you leave us with?
Just thank you to Allison. It's been such an honor and pleasure to be with you and Tia in this circle tonight, and all of you listeners. And yeah, go to the water and splash some on your face, and drink a glass of water, and really really allow this information to percolate. And it has deeply inspired me. I think I have some ideas, Allison, that I'll reach out to you over. But yeah, just thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and happy birthday this weekend.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So Allison, what would you leave us with on tonight? What do you want Love Bay to walk away with?
You know, I don't need anybody to have ever experienced sexual violence, or to even know somebody who's been affected in this kind of way to just understand this sucks. Like, if I could just have a bunch of people get together and go, wow, oh my God, it all makes sense. All of this pain in all of its forms, all of us, this sucks. And I hope that, if anything, I know that it's sad. It's my everyday experience supporting survivors of these violent circumstances, and helping people help these individuals in any way that I can. And I hope one day that we can all just kind of come to terms with needing to be mobilized to do something better, and that identifying a problem and feeling pain in response to that problem is the first step to making a positive change. So take this discomfort and honor it as a seed for something much better, or at least something to soften whatever that future could look like. So do not despair.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Allison. I sincerely appreciate you being here with us. I appreciate everything that you shared. Erin, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being with us on tonight. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember that we're rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.